just some of the suggestions being made by the outgoing Chief Medical Officer for England, Dame Sally Davies. This is in her final report in the role. What Dame Sally sees as the fight of snacking is in her sights. She says that the action needs to be taken because England is nowhere near the government's ambition of halving childhood obesity by 2030. Here's what some people in Manchester think of her proposals to ban snacking on public transport.
I think that's quite harsh.
Yeah, I think people are going to eat whatever, so I wouldn't do that personally.
Well, I think that's great. In fact, I think everybody should stop eating on public transport. But definitely for children, yes, I think so.
If you're on a double-decker bus and they're upstairs, you can't exactly, stop them from eating, unless you have, people on the bus to enforce it.
We can ask, but that's about it.
Well, it'd be like smoking, wouldn't it? You ban that everywhere and less people smoke.
I think it'd be very hard to stop. The public now are not obedient like they used to be in the old days.
I think it's a little bit unfair to ban them from eating on public transport. I think it's really down to the parents, so maybe we should look at educating the parents to then feed that on to the children.
If they try to enforce it, I don't think it'd be a massive backlash for them.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's ridiculous.
Some of the other suggestions the outgoing Chief Medical Officer has come up with include free water refills at all food outlets and public sector buildings and regular car-free weekends across the country to encourage physical activity. I'm now joined by two people with strong yet differing views on this report. Sally Warren is Director of Policy at the King's Fund, a think tank specialising in healthcare policy. She's an expert on health policy and delivery by central and local government. Good morning. And Matt Kilcoyne is Deputy Director of the Adam Smith Institute, a think tank that's in favour of deregulation and free market policies. Hello to you, Matt.
Good morning, Emma.
Thanks for joining us. Sally, if I come to you first, tell us about your perspective on the report and this idea of perhaps that's really got people's imaginations going, the idea that we could ban snacking on public transport.
Yeah, so today's report by Dame Sally is a really important report in the continued fight against childhood obesity. So the current projections are that by 2030, 1 in 3 of our most deprived children would be obese. And that's clearly not a projection that we want to see become a reality. So it's right that government is considering quite radical and bold options that can look across the piece. I think the really important thing about obesity is there's no magic bullet to solve it, and there's more than 40 recommendations in today's report, although obviously a lot of the talk in the media is focusing on a single recommendation around food on public transport. I think that particular recommendation is likely to be very challenging to ever implement, and as your Manchester Voice has suggested, quite a mix of whether that will be supported or not. But I think it's quite an important idea to get us to think about actually children are snacking a lot on buses. So it's kind of, for me, this is about how often are children snacking, what's the calories that they're snacking on, and are they doing that in an informed and educated way or not, rather than where the snacking happens.
Matt?
It's infantilising and it's snobbish. And frankly, to be quite honest with you, she's done as good a job as I could ever do of undermining all of the work on public health in her last report as the Chief Medical Officer. The idea that she has the authority or that anyone would have the ability to ban food on commuter trains, on buses, is just a nonsense. Who gets to rule on the exemptions? Who gets to decide whether if I'm emotional I can eat, if I've got diabetes I can eat on this train? And it just shows the level of sheer sort of oversight that she thinks that she has over the entire country and its entire populace. The idea that adults are not able to choose what's right for them in any situation, and also what's right for their families and for their children.
Sorry, I was just going to say it wasn't necessarily about adults though at that point.
No, but it is about adults actually, because it is about controlling. Because in order to tackle childhood obesity, she actually has to tackle the adults as well. So the bans on things like advertising, bans on things like eating on public transport are not just for children, they're for everybody, because you have to treat in order to deal with the children issue, she feels like you have to control all of adult behaviour as well.
Sally, would you like to come back on that?
Yeah, so I think it's really important that we understand what's driving obesity and people being overweight. Nobody is choosing to be obese or overweight. What's happened is that our market and our environment have developed in a way that's meant choices are stacked against individuals. So children are not making choices knowing that those choices are going to lead to them being overweight and obese. So it does require us to think boldly about lots of different types of activity that can help change that environment. And Dame Sally's report today has covered quite a lot of ideas that are not her saying this, that she is imposing this on society. She's saying these are her recommendations to government. And some of these ideas do have much more public support than you might assume and that Matt would personally have. So if we look, for example, her ideas about limiting fast food outlets near school or advertising restrictions, 70% of the public supported those measures when we looked at this last year. So I think politicians do need to be bold. They do need to recognise there's a really complex set of issues which are limiting the individual choices people have and causing people to be obese, and that does require us to be bold and brave.
I'm sorry,
I
Emma.
also think it's important to say some of the things that Matt was talking about how you can't impose on people's freedoms, would have been exactly the same thing people first said when we started talking about banning smoking in public places. That is now a massively popular measure that has had huge health implications. So I think we do need to think about what do the public recognise as a health crisis and what are they prepared to do.
The idea that the curly whirly that you have on the bus is the same as passive smoking is frankly insulting to the average listener. But let's talk about childhood obesity, because the statistics that you're using and the statistics that Dame Sally uses are gamed. They're wrong. And actually the United Kingdom does not have the level of childhood obesity that you're talking about and that you suggest. It means that we have to have these kind of draconian actions. The idea that 11 to 15-year-olds, a quarter of them are obese, and then suddenly aged 18, actually it's only 10%, isn't true. It is true, however, that as you get older, as the population gets older, people get fatter. And actually what's happened in the United Kingdom is that the prevalence of obesity has increased at the rate at which the average of which the aged population has increased as well. So the UK is not getting suddenly fatter. It's not like we're suddenly eating more. It's not like we're suddenly having more sugar in our diets. Actually, sugar consumption peaked in the 1970s. Calorie consumption peaked in the early noughties. And when you say that the choices are gamed against people, that's not true. No one knows. No one thinks, and I would actually say no one in this country thinks that eating a piece of fried chicken is equatable to eating an apple.
But they still do it.
But they still do it. And do you know why they do it? Because public health isn't the only thing that matters. It's about enjoyment of life as well. When I go into a shop and I get to choose between having a set of carrot sticks or having a Mars bar, sometimes I choose the carrot sticks and sometimes I choose the Mars bar because I know that there's a rational choice that I make. But it's a rational choice that I make. And actually, in a free society, in a free country as we have, those choices have to be made and they have to be left to the individual with as much information as possible. Yes, and that's the role that she should have, but she should not be imposing her decisions on the rest of the country.
Sally?
But I think that's assuming that everybody has the ability to make the same choices that you're talking about, Matt. And actually there are a huge number of places across the country where they don't have easy access to healthy options, so they can't choose the carrot sticks, and also they can't afford to choose
Where in the country can you not buy fruit and vegetables?
Plenty of housing estates across the country do not have easy access to vegetables. And if you look at healthy diet guidelines, it would take 60% of the income of the most deprived families in this country to be able to follow those guidelines. That means it's not a realistic choice for many people. So what government needs to do is take a series of measures that can help make people be living in an environment where those choices are easier.
But those options,
and that requires balancing, planning, tax, regulation.
Those options that you put forward have been bans and extra taxes, which would make it more expensive.
Let's just come back to those in just a moment. Matt, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
While I'm very familiar with this line of argument within Brexit territory as well at the moment. I've got a figure, you've got a figure, but just putting that to the side, what has changed in the last 30 years is the prevalence of fried chicken shops on our high streets versus other shops being there. So yes, you can always get fruit and veg most of the time, most places. Often they can be more expensive, those packets that they often come with other things in them. But of course you can go and buy, raw ingredients much cheaper. But the ease of access to those foods has led to a lot of people snacking, not their dinner, snacking on fried chicken. A lot of children straight after school. That you can't deny. I don't need a figure to have it. It's more than anecdotally true. Do you have any suggestions as someone who supports anything but a nanny state as to how to deal with that?
Well, actually, you don't need to deal with it. The time in which you are most able as a human to deal with having excess calories is as a child. Like that's why it's absolutely
not if you're 16-year-old and you're playing computer games the entire time.
Well, true. In which case they need to be. Well, this is the point, right? So.
Well, this is what I'm sorry. I'm trying to paint a realistic picture of a teenager's life, not one that's running around all the time playing sports.
Well, actually, most children are. This is
but there are lots of children who are
untrue.
obese.
It's untrue to sit there and say that the children are getting massively fatter. They're not.
I didn't say that sentence.
But they are living a more sedentary lifestyle. That's absolutely true.
Right. So if we could just agree that things have got worse in that area compared to post-World Wars, we can agree that there's been a whole range of factors for that. What is the Adam Smith Institute's suggestion about that, apart from let us be free to be fat?
No, it actually is. It is entirely that you are entitled to live your life as much as you, in the way that you want it, and that your family have a responsibility. So the idea that children, this is the point, that children have agency over their own lives, yes, but they have reduced agency, and that we as a society deem it to be, you deem to be adult when you turn 18, and so you have control over your life then. And therefore, up until that point, families have a responsibility to look after their children. Families have a responsibility to make sure that they're getting enough exercise, that they're eating healthily, and that isn't actually within the gift of government, and it shouldn't be within the gift of government. It's also not within the gift of wider society to impose that onto other people.
From your perspective, then it's just very interesting to get this as clear cut. From your perspective, there's nothing that the chief medical officer could have ever put in a report that you would have supported.
Well, I don't think actually that the chief medical officer should be focusing on things like childhood obesity and adult obesity, when she should be focusing on things like vaccinations, where she has completely failed, hasn't she? Well, this is the thing. Her legacy will be forever that she focused on ruining your fizzy drinks and on the size of the pizza boxes and Snickers bars and Kit Kats, rather than making sure that we have herd immunity against infectious diseases. We've seen the result of her lack of. With
all due respect, the chief medical officer can't make law. It's Matt Hancock, the current health secretary, who won't commit yet to mandatory checks in schools. Well, she can't make law. She can recommend.
It was her choice, Emma, actually, to focus in her final report on childhood obesity rather than on vaccinations.
But you're flitting here. If you're going to say about,
it's not. It's absolutely not.
Can I just finish the sentence?
It's her entire career has been about focusing on controlling childhood behaviour.
And a lot of people would say that's a very good thing to focus on. But just on your point, it is up to the government ultimately whether they make a move to make immunisations mandatory. She did speak about that, though, this morning. Sally, to come back then on what Matt has said, Matt's made a very strong case there that it's not the chief medical officer's role to do this. If we leave that to one side just for a moment, because debating someone's job brief is relatively limited in terms of entertainment or otherwise, and she's not here to answer for herself, what about what Matt has said there, that it is down to families, it is not down to state instruments to do this?
I don't agree with Matt on that. So I think if you look at what's causing obesity, which is both the change in calories that we eat, the increase in snacking, but also the reduction in activity, a lot of that is not because of the direct individual choices people are making. It's because of the wider environment they are living in. And that means that we need to think about how can we as a civic society and the government stack the odds more in their favour than against. I think it's also really important that we remember this is about childhood obesity, and it is really important that we think about children's rights, and where is it right that this is left entirely to parents, and where is it right that society as a whole tries to stack the odds in favour of children being able to live healthy lives. We make these decisions quite often. But what I'll say is this is very, very complicated stuff. So when you're talking about healthy food and unhealthy food, there's no such thing as healthy or unhealthy food. It's all about how much you consume, when you're consuming it. So it is a very complicated world. It all means that Sally's made some bold recommendations, and government now need to think really carefully about what's the policy intention of those goals, how can they be implemented in a way that reduces health inequalities, not widening them, which is what we've been seeing in the last 10 years, to really help children be able to have a much better start in life than they're currently having.
I think we could go on this. Sorry, Matt, go on. A very quick point, if you will.
I think when we're talking about things like fried chicken shops, and we're talking about banning things on public transport and at football stadiums, that we have to be very careful about the level of patronisation we make of middle class and working class lifestyles, because she's not talking about brie and Beaujolais, which contain high levels of fat and sugar, and which the upper middle classes are apparently trusted by our elites to consume willy-nilly.
But they are talking about. I don't think many people are drinking Beaujolais when they're under 16. Specifically childhood obesity, and looking at how you can best stack the odds in favour of children being able to make healthy choices.
You'd be amazed at what people consume from upper middle class households under the age of 18, and it's 16. So actually, yes, I think actually and I would say that cheese and very expensive meats are consumed by people who are under the age of 16, and it's insulting to say otherwise. But the fact is that there is a level of classism in all of these.
You're quite insulted, aren't you, today?
I am insulted. I'm insulted that we've managed to give this person, Dame Sally Davies, a level of platform where she has the ability to to control and to say and to connive against the lifestyles of people in this country and to patronise them and say that they've never had
what about this message
that they're
just
too
came
stupid,
in?
that
Someone
they're
just
too
came
poor,
in.
that
Martin,
they're too...
sorry, I've got a message for you, Matt. Martin says this guy is out of touch, meaning you. He says, show me a place where you can't buy fruit and veg. This journalist has got in touch to say, I can. They are what's known, as food deserts in many inner cities where all there is available is convenience food stores. It is a well-known problem. Why are you ignoring that problem is the question.
The food deserts, by the way, which are described as being within 500 metres, I think. That's just not, so less than a third of a mile walking distance. Now, we say that you are within a distance of a train station if you're within a mile walking distance. So it's not. It's a made-up term. No, it's a made-up term that's used to justify this kind of interventionism. So that's the point. Like when we're talking about statistics, and you said this about Brexit earlier. You've got a statistic. You've got a statistic.
Well, actually, I just did this with the former Chancellor.
Well, yes, but that's the whole point of the. Sorry, when we give people like Dame Sally Davies a quango crap position, where they can come up with terms that they define themselves, when they come up with statistics that they define themselves, and then they use emotive language around them, they then get to justify interventions politically that they suggest to our politicians. And that's exactly what she's done for the past 5 years. And when we're talking about a slippery slope, well, this is as slippery as you get as a slope, isn't it?
Sally Warren, just to come back then, and then I really am going to go to a caller. Go on. Sally, is there anything you wanted to add?
Obesity is a major problem, and Matt can argue about the data, but it's clearly a worldwide problem. It's affecting our poorest children most, and we therefore need to take a wide range of actions to tackle it. That needs to reflect the fact that children cannot always make their own choices, and they're living in an environment where choices are quite often stacked against them. So I think we need to be bold, but absolutely we need to be engaging with the public to understand what they do and don't consider acceptable. And I think Sally's report is kind of putting down some pretty bold ideas. Not all of those will be implemented, I'm sure, but it's part of a discussion about what's right for society to do collectively versus what's an individual right and responsibility.
Many responses coming in on this. Matt, someone's saying they agree with you fully and they're now hangry. Hungry and angry, if you don't know that phrase. Sally Warren there, Director of Policy at the King's Fund. Thank you for your contributions. And Matt Kilcoyne there, Deputy Director of the Adam Smith Institute. Thank you very much.